So Jeff Hurst, the Trevor Brooking and Billy Bonds, Paolo Di Canio, West Ham United, more than just a podcast. More than just a podcast.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. This is more than just a podcast. This is a bonus episode. We talked about this on Tuesday. Our good friend and occasional guest presenter Iain Dale does a book club podcast. This week he spoke to Tony Carr, former academy director of West Ham, and he generously sent us a copy to play as an extra episode on this podcast. So take it away, Iain.
Today we're going to do something a little bit different. I don't normally do football books on this podcast, although I do read an awful lot of them. My main reading is political biographies and diaries and football biographies and diaries. So when I saw that Tony Carr was publishing a book, I thought I've got to get him on, because Tony, for those of you who are in the world of football, you will know of Tony Carr because he's been at West Ham for about 40 years in all sorts of different capacities, and he's kind of lived the life of the club through the last 40 years. And as most of you will know, if you listen to my radio show, I am a devout West Ham supporter. So I thought, what a great opportunity to get him in to talk about his book. It's called A Lifetime in Football at West Ham United. Tony, welcome. When I was in publishing, I wanted to publish this book, but we never quite made it work. But I'm absolutely delighted that you have put your story down on paper, because it's very rare that people nowadays in the world of football spend so much time at a particular club. And you started off as a player, but didn't quite, because of injury, didn't quite make it into the first team. But you've had a wonderful career coaching some of the best known players in English football, and you've now put it down on paper. Why did you decide that you needed to write the book?
Yes, well, in effect, I think a conversation with you initially planted the seed, and I thought it was an appropriate time to look back, and write down, memorise, remember, etc. All the stages of my career in that respect. And as you can see in the book, I start at the end, where it ended a little bit, not very nice at that particular, but I'm over that now. That isn't a problem. So then I thought, well, let's start at the beginning, where I grew up, where I started to play football, and how I developed into the coach that I became in the end. And as you say, 43 years unbroken service for the Hammers. So, a lot of players have come through my...
Well, they certainly have, and we'll come on to the end at the end.
Yes, okay.
I wondered, because in a sense, it was a sad ending, the way the club treated you right at the end. And to stay with one club as a coach for that long is unheard of, certainly yes. in the modern day, isn't it? Because managers change a lot more frequently, and they tend to bring in their own people. But you did last the course through quite a few managers.
Yes. I suppose you could say I was lucky in that respect. I think in terms of I felt the most vulnerable when John Lyall was sacked.
Yeah.
And
this is in 1989.
Yeah, 1989-90, and Lou Macari came in. And we all thought it was Ron Boyce and Mick McGivern at the time as the coaches, and Billy Bonds at that time had the youth team, because I'd moved up into the reserves at that point. And I think we all felt vulnerable at that point, that Lou would bring his own men in, and we'd be looking for new appointments. But it didn't happen. Lou was very good, to be fair, a really good man. Stayed loyal with everybody, let us get on with it, and certainly with my remit with the sort of younger players, was left to my own devices, in effect, carry on with what you're already doing. So that was where I've probably felt the most vulnerable. But every change of manager, you often wonder, you just don't know. But I was lucky enough to survive You know, and
Well, let's talk about the different managers, because when you joined the club as a teenager, Ron Greenwood was the manager.
Yeah.
I mean, I suspect. I mean, John Lyle and Ron Greenwood. I don't think West Ham fans like to compare them really, because they were almost sort of symbiotic. John Lyle was the assistant manager under Ron Greenwood. What did you learn from Ron Greenwood, and was it him that encouraged you to go into coaching?
No, it was John really that encouraged me to go into coaching, because Ron was the manager when I first joined as a 15-year-old apprentice, but John was my youth team coach at that point. So it was John and Ron. Everything about them was about the technical side of the game, how to stand, get a picture. Get a picture was Ron's mantra on the training ground. And when I first heard that, I didn't know what he was talking about. I thought, get a picture, what's he on about? But obviously you certainly realise that, before the ball arrives with you, get a picture of what's on and around you, so you can make a quick decision of where to play the next pass. So you start to learn those little anecdotes and those little things, and stand on the half turn, play the way you're facing, all these little things that stick with you. And it was Ron, and then John was basically Ron's disciple in that respect. And then John became the assistant manager when Ron moved upstairs, and then eventually moved into the England job in the late 70s.
77, I think.
Yeah, after Revie had gone to the United Arab Emirates. But certainly it was John that then encouraged us to take up coaching. We used to go in the schools in the afternoon when we were young professionals, and instead of whiling away the time in a snooker hall, go and visit a local school and go on the pitches for an hour with the school teachers and teach some football, which is what a lot of us did. And I always used to go with Peter Grotier, the goalkeeper, not Peter Braybrook, that was later on. And that sort of got me into coaching. And I found even at that early age, when I was an aspiring young player, that I enjoyed it. I enjoyed that, imparting that information that I was being taught every day. Although in a basic form, because of the mixed levels of children you're coaching. But no, that's what started me off really. And then when West Ham decided that I wasn't going to be good enough and released me, it was John that pulled me to one side and said, "What?" Because I'd already got my basic coaching award.
How old were you at that point?
I was 18 when I got my first coaching award, and I was 19 when they released me. And John said, "Well, why don't you go and do your advanced licence?" I was just coming up 20, and I don't know. He said, "Well, I'll get you on the course. Don't worry about it. I'll get you on the course. It's at Lillishall. It's 2 weeks in the summer. You've got to go out there, and it's a residential course." So I did. That's what I did, and I didn't pass that year. I was green and naive, and my head was in a bit.
How old were the other people on the course?
Well, they were all predominantly ex-pros that were finishing their careers.
Because you always imagine a football coach to be sort of maybe in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and you were 20.
I was 20.
Were you accepted by all the other people?
I think they looked at me with a little bit of, who's this, who's this little whippersnapper, But anyway, although I didn't pass on that occasion, it taught me so much in terms of what I didn't know.
But when you were released by West Ham at that young age, that must have given you a lot of insight into how to handle those situations later on, because
most definitely.
I mean, presumably every teenager. I mean, some of them have been with the club since the age of 8 or 9, haven't they?
Yeah.
And that moment at the age of 15, 16, 17, 18, to be told, "Well, sorry, you're not going to make it," that must be the most shattering blow.
Yes, I mean, I've had the experience of it myself, and as you say, as the sort of academy director for many years. I'd had to sit across a desk and tell, a boy of the same age or even younger that this is the end of the road as far as you're concerned at West Ham. We don't think you're going to progress anymore. So that was tough. But, I always used to say, I've been on that side of the desk. Yeah. I've been in your seat, so I know exactly how you feel.
Life does go on.
And I said that there is life after West Ham United. Life goes on. Yeah. And so I try to sort of soften the blow, if you like, a little bit.
And when you've sat the other side of the desk, have there been a few that have actually then gone on to be really top-class players? You think, oh my God, how did I let him go?
No, to be honest, I don't think there's many have gone on and had a career in the game. Yeah, but not. Would you say to come back and what you might call embarrass you in terms of, oh Christ, I made a hasty decision there. He's now playing for Liverpool, or he's now playing for England, Ireland, or wherever.
Because there are a few that, I mean, like Tony Adams and John Terry and Ray Houghton, they were all at West Ham. And I think even Kenny Dalglish had a trial,
Kenny Dalglish, yes, he did. He
and Gaza.
And he was at my age, Kenny, was when he came down with a guy named Jimmy Mullen, the two of them. And, I remember training with them. They came down, and the thing that stuck out, and I remember, was their thick Scottish accents. For me, a boy in the East End, never really been out of London very much, to hear a real Scottish Glaswegian brogue was quite strange. Couldn't understand half of what they said. And it was Jimmy Mullen that told me the story about Kenny and the Boots. I don't know, which I've relayed in the book, because Jimmy Mullen emailed me many years later. He wanted to come make one last visit to Upton Park before it was demolished, basically. And we met up and spoke old times, and he said, "Do you remember when Kenny come down with me?" I said, "Yeah, of course I do." And we told me the story about they blagged a pair of boots off Albert Walker, saying that Ron said we can have a pair of boots from Greenwood. And Albert gave him the boots. He said Ron had said no such thing. So, a couple of scallywags got a pair of boots off of West Ham. But no, Ray Houghton was one that I probably think John's one big mistake, letting Ray go. We had a young Alan Dickens in the system. And I think he felt that Alan was, far greater potential. And Ray, we used to call him Scotty. Scotty Houghton was 18, 19, and he felt he'd made his debut against Arsenal at Highbury, but John thought he could let him go because Alan Dickens was coming through, and obviously the opposite happened, really. Alan didn't reach the heights we all expected, and Ray went on to great things. So that was a big mistake John made, I think. Tony Adams was different because Steve Potts, Tony Adams, both come out of the Barking district area and both played for the Barking district football team, and they both come and trained. And Tony was going to Arsenal as well as West Ham. At that time, you could. And Tony decided not to sign for West Ham and sign for Arsenal. And obviously, Potsy decided to stay with West Ham, being a staunch West Ham fan.
And what a player he was.
Yeah, very much so. Mr. Reliable.
Iain Dale's Book Club.
You pepper the book with interviews that you've done with some of the former players, which I thought was quite an interesting thing to do. But I mean, we'll come on to one or two of the other ones. But I thought it was really interesting with Steve Potts when he played, 500 or 600 games for West Ham, didn't he? Either centre back or right back. And I saw him play loads of times. I can't actually ever remember him having a bad game.
No,
he was the so-called Mr. Reliable, wasn't he?
He was always 7, 8 out of 10.
And we always wanted him to score a goal. He did score one, I think, didn't he?
Bobbled in, didn't he?
But he talks about his kids in the book and how they, in a sense, revived his interest in the game and got him back into coaching, because he's now, of course, at West Ham as a coach.
Yeah, I talked him back in, because he used to come over in the evenings with his two boys, and they're different ages, of course. But and I said, "Well, why don't you get a little bit involved?" No, I wasn't, because he was driving a mini cab after playing 600 games for West Ham at a very top level. Was driving a London cab, and I said, "Well, come and do a little bit." Come and do a little bit part-time, even just come in the evening, do a little bit. And he wasn't sure, and then he said to me, "I'll give it a go." And obviously he's gone on and on and on, and he's now with the under-23s. So yeah, good on him. He's still, he's still the same old Steve, and very humble, feet on the ground, and a really nice guy.
And his son Daniel, I remember seeing his debut, and I thought it was one of the best debuts I've ever seen at West Ham. But he didn't make it, did he?
No.
And I think this was under Sam Allardyce, and he just didn't. He's played a few times, but didn't get the chances. And then I don't know, is he still at Luton? I think that's where.
Yeah, I think he's still at Luton. Yeah,
I thought he was a fantastic little player.
Yeah, but we all thought that he had what it took. I must admit. But at the end of the day, we in the academy, and when I say we, it's not a one-man band. It's not just me. It's a team of coaches and scouts, etc. And we all thought he was going to push on. Just needed to get a little bit stronger, a little bit physically, bodily stronger, because it's physically demanding. And like you said, did he get the opportunities? Opportunity is massive. for any young player that there's a manager that can say, I see something in him, and persevere, keep with him.
Because that's one of the themes of the book, in a way. It's sort of the ones that got away in terms of either they, because of their own personalities or their own commitment, they didn't quite make it. I mean, there's one that really sticks in my mind who I don't remember. Well, in fact, I think I did see him in one of the Youth Cup finals, Bertie Brayley.
Oh, Bertie, yeah.
Who you clearly thought had it in him to
Yes.
become a top-class player, but he just didn't have the application.
No, quite right. And one or two of the players that I interviewed mentioned Bertie.
Yeah.
Because he was an outstanding youth team player, a bit like Adam Newton, the right back.
Yep.
That we all thought, this kid's got a future. Didn't quite work out, and so it isn't just always about talent. It's about application, character, mental strength. Being able to handle the lows as well as the highs.
Because you talk about some of the players who then you meet a bit later on in their careers, 10 or 15 years down the line. I'm thinking of Junior Stanislas
Junior,
here, who, again, looked a super little player for West Ham at times, scored some fantastic goals.
Yes.
But again, never quite made it. And just tell us about sort of the conversation that you had with him recently.
With Junior, as a youth team player, I was always on him. And the reason I was always on him, because he had real talent. Good manipulator of the ball, could run with it, great delivery of crosses and free kicks and shots, and but his application at times was wanting, and you always wanted to push him and try to take him to the level that he didn't really want to go to. When I say didn't want to go to, he didn't want to push himself enough to get there, where others, Lampards of this world have pushed and pushed and pushed and reached the heights of the game. But with Bertie at that time, not Bertie, Junior, sorry. With Junior, I was always on his back. I can remember vividly one Friday morning, we were playing Arsenal the following day in an under-18 league game. So I just wanted to do 20 minutes just with a bit of team shape. We didn't often do that at youth team then, but I thought Arsenal, they were going to pass and move, pass around us. Let's just try and be harder to beat. And I was asking Junior to do something, and just wasn't interested. He's what we're doing here. He wasn't interested. Didn't show the desire to want to add anything to his game or learn anything tactically, and that really, really disappointed me. So I had the ump of him anyway the next day, and I think we lost about 5-1. And I remember talking to him the following week, saying, your performance was a direct result of your attitude on Friday morning. And a few years later, when I did bump into him, but he did make the first team. I think he played about 30, 40 games. I think he played a good few games. Yep. And maybe that was...
He was always one of those that the crowd always urged the manager to bring on if he was on the bench. They wanted to see him.
He could do things. He could beat people. He could he could deliver a telling cross. And obviously he left and ended up, I think he went to Burnley initially with Eddie Howe and Jason Tyndall. And when they went back to Bournemouth, they brought Junior from Burnley, and Junior ended up playing in the Premier League and is still playing today. And I bumped into him a few years later, and he said to me, "I wish I'd listened to you when I was 17." He said, and because I've now realised that you don't get anywhere in this game without hard work and good application and graft.
And that's one thing that comes through in the different interviews that you do. And you ask each of the players, and you talk to Michael Carrick, Joe Cole, Rio Ferdinand, Mark Noble, a few others, and you ask them all, so who are the ones that you think could have made it but didn't, and why? And it's interesting that several of them named the same players, don't they?
So it's amazing. At least with someone like Junior, the penny dropped eventually.
Yeah.
And I think, that's good. But some don't, they sometimes don't believe the coach, whether it be me or anybody else. Or when I say don't believe, they go, well, I don't really need to do that. I can get by with this and I'll be all right, so to speak. And, you're not all right unless you take care of your own well-being.
Joe Cole tells an interesting story about the boy that he roomed with at Lilleshall when he went there. Was it Ian Armstrong?
Ian Armstrong, yeah.
Who was the only one of his yearly cohort that didn't go on to really make it. I think he ended up playing at Port Vale for a bit, but then drifted out of the game. And he said he was a cracking player.
Yeah.
You just sort of look at all of these, I mean, not just the West Ham ones, excuse me, that you talk about in the book, but somebody should actually write a book about those that got away and why, and then give that book to every single 16-year-old that signs in an academy at every club, because it must be awful to get to the age of 30 and just keep thinking what might have been.
I think today within academies, and at that time we're talking Joe sort of mid-90s, when he was at Lillishore, the national school, with the lad we're talking about, that there's a lot more care and attention on welfare, mental well-being, and looking for signs of maybe depression or unhappiness. And so I think there's more care in that respect now. I think it'd be those sorts of traits might be recognised a lot earlier than they are, rather than go, let him go and forget about him.
What about the life of a young footballer? Because when you first joined West Ham in the mid-60s, and then going through, I would say, to maybe the end of the 20th century, I mean, the kids who were in the academy were expected to earn their keep, really, weren't they?
Yeah.
Whereas now, I mean, I don't know how much the average 18-year-old footballer who might be just on the verge of making it into the first team gets paid, but you can't pay someone a few £1,000s a week and then expect them to clean boots, can you?
No. Well, what we used to do, because you can sign as a professional at 17 years old. So you sign initially a 2-year scholarship. It used to be 3 when kids left school a little bit earlier. But it was 16, 18, 2-year scholarship. Now, if we had an outstanding player like a Carrick or a Cole or somebody, and they were showing outstanding talent, we would sign them early at 17. And once we'd signed them professional, they were excused from the jobs, so to speak, in inverted commas. They still used to have to be amongst the youth programme unless they were training with the first team. But they were excused the jobs, the menial side of it. But what we did expect them to do, if they weren't doing the jobs, maybe for an hour in the afternoon when we had to tidy up before they'd go home, they'd maybe spend an hour in the gym doing some work. They weren't just sitting in the canteen drinking tea or watching TV or something. So, but a lot of the young lads, funnily enough, didn't mind mucking in. I'll help so we can get away. If we clean our job is to clean the home dressing room, I'll help him get it clean, then we can get going. So there was a camaraderie amongst some of those young players as well.
And what about the relationship between the first team players and the youth team players? Has that changed over the years?
It has changed now, because a lot of clubs, and West Ham now, are on split sites.
Yeah.
So the young players up until the age of 17, 18 really don't come anywhere near the first team players. So in some respects, the manager don't even know they are. Some of the players don't really know the younger players. So that I think that's a trick they've missed a little bit.
Well, it is, because there's several anecdotes that you tell in the book about where maybe a couple of players were injured in the first team, and then Harry Redknapp would shout over to you, "Can you send us a midfielder over here?"
Yeah.
And the midfielder, tell the Michael Carrick story.
Yeah, I mean that exactly what happened here, and it was. We were training at Chapel Heath, where everybody trained on the same site. I was training on one pitch. Harry and Frank were on the other pitch, and obviously someone limped off, got a kick on wherever, the ankle or the knee, and they limped off training. So Harry needed another player, and he'd shout across, "Tony, I need a midfield player." So he'd obviously send a midfield player over, and I sent over Michael Carrick. And
he would have been how old then?
I suppose he'd be 17 at the oldest. 16, 17, probably about 17, and sent Michael over. And as we finished training, the first team were finishing training, and we was walking off the pitches, and Eyal Berkovic came up to me and said, "Who is this player you sent over?" I can't do the accent, but he said, "Who is this player you sent over?" So I said, "It's Michael Carrick." He went, "He will take my place in the team one day." And I went, "Really?" He said, "Yes, most definitely."
And the interesting thing is, you didn't tell Michael Carrick
No, I didn't tell Michael that, no.
Why not?
No, I didn't want to it raises expectations too highly or too quickly. And I told him a bit later on. And he went, okay. And he was already amongst the first team elite.
Was he one that you always thought had a really good chance of making it? Because, of course, he came from the northeast,
That's
didn't
right,
he?
yeah.
And why did he sign for West Ham?
Yes, it's an interesting one. I mean, I'm not sure if Michael explains it in his interview in the book, but when I asked him, why did you sign for us, in terms of why did you leave the northeast? And he said he used to go to Wallsend Boys Club, went there as a very young boy, where anyone with any talent in the northeast went to Wallsend Boys Club. And he said, then I started to train with Newcastle. They picked me up, and I started to train with them. And I also was training, I had a little look at Middlesbrough and the clubs up that area. He said, but Newcastle was his team. And he said, as I started to get a bit, all my mates were on at me all the time. You're going to make it for Newcastle. Yeah, you're definitely going to be a player for Newcastle. And it said it tended to put a little bit of pressure on me. He said, and I thought if I came away from that environment, that might help me develop into the player I want to be. He said, and obviously I came down south. He said I visited a few clubs and they visited Chelsea. And it's interesting, his parents said they felt intimidated at Chelsea, that maybe it was too elite, the whole environment. Oh, sit there, go there, he goes there, you sit there. Whereas when they walked into Chadwell Heath, it was like, walking into an East End cafe. Hey, come on, let's have a sit down, have a cup of tea, a smile on people's faces.
And I think he said it was the way they treated his mum.
I think, exactly.
Always treat their mothers well.
Yeah, because he said to me, my mum and dad made put no pressure on me to sign for any club. He said it was my decision. He said, when I knew my mum and dad felt comfortable at West Ham, he said, and I liked the training and I liked the coaching and I liked the openness about it, he said, that made a decision for me. And, that pleased me really, because the whole time I was there, it was always about creating the right environment. We didn't have the best facilities. We still haven't. They're better, a lot better than they were, but we still haven't, you look at what the Tottenhams, the Chelseas, and the Arsenals have got. West Ham has still got a little bit to do in that respect. But one thing West Ham have got, they've got that homely feeling, and it's an old cliche, but it's a family feeling. People feel comfortable.
And when a kid has got, well, with the parents as well, of course, because mostly I suspect the parents do have an influence on the decision. When they've got 3 or 4 clubs that are chasing them, that really can be, I think Joe Cole said this, that's the crucial thing as to why he decided to go with West Ham. Because I think, was he an Arsenal supporter originally? I can't remember.
I think he was Chelsea.
Was he Chelsea?
I think it was Chelsea. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it was Chelsea.
Because your natural thing, presumably, is you ideally want to go to the club that you support.
Yeah.
But then again, if you feel more comfortable and at home somewhere else, then there's a good chance you're going to sign with them. And I think that's one of the themes of the book, and that you created this atmosphere. I mean, was it deliberate? Did you actually sit down and think, right, this is what we need to do, or was it just you as a person managed to?
Yeah, I think it was something that in some ways I inherited. That was the way they wanted to do things, in John's day when he was with the youth programme. Always make the parents feel comfortable. They mustn't ever feel intimidated by walking in the door. They must feel comfortable. They can sit down, put the TV on, watch a bit of TV while the kids are training, or they can go and watch the training, whichever. And I carried that on, and developed it. The facilities got a little bit better, but it was almost it was a conscious effort to make sure that we maintain that with the coaches. And I used to say to the coaches, the only reason we're all here is for the players. It's not the other way round. They're not here for us. We're here for them. So it's important that we respect that and respect the young players and do the best we can by them. And the same with the parents. If it wasn't for the parents ferrying their children backwards and forwards, we owe them a debt. Because they didn't get travel expenses or anything like that, whereas some clubs were paying travel expenses, but West Ham never did.
Iain Dale's Book Club.
How, and this has presumably changed over the ages, but how old must a player be before they get a regular monthly or weekly salary?
Well, it's when they leave school and sign as they call it
16.
scholarships now.
Yeah.
It's apprenticeships, same, just a different word, because it's educational and football training. That goes hand in glove now.
And is it the case that, I mean, if you've got a potential star player on your hands, they can be earning, even at the age of 16, 17, thousands of pounds a week?
No, they can't, because you cannot sign a professional until you're 17 years old.
Right.
So at 16, until your 17th birthday, for instance, the figures are set out by the Premier League.
Okay.
So every club in the country, I think it's probably around about £150 a week now, per player, obviously. And they get their travelling expenses paid. I mean, obviously they get a lunch at the training ground, and they get £150 a week, and probably pay, I don't know what the thresholds are, tax thresholds, but probably pay no tax on them either. So, and it's not until they're 17 that they might be earning, £3,000, £4,000, £5,000, £6,000 a week.
And that presumably brings its own pressures, something
Yes.
which in your day as a player would have been unthinkable. How to handle money, for example.
Yes, yeah. What you'll find now, though, is that's taken care of by agents.
Yeah.
Because the best players will have agents. Even, dare I say it, even, the worst player in the squad will have an agent. And I don't mean it as disrespectful, because they all feel it's the thing to do. I've got to have an agent. They don't really.
And would you have to deal with the agents, or would that be somebody else?
Yeah, at the young age, I'd have to deal with the agent, yeah.
And, I mean, that must be quite difficult,
It can be.
depending who the agent is, I suppose.
Some agents are very good, very fair, understanding in terms of not raising the bar too quickly, too early, and some want it now.
Yeah.
And in some ways, that de-incentivise the player in some respects, because if he's already negotiated, because he's a real player at that age, you think, Christ, this kid's got something. I say a Rooney, for instance, you go 70, he's in the team. Christ Almighty, what a player this is! We've got to give him top dollar, relatively speaking, and that can turn him a little bit. So I'm reluctant to pay too much, but it's. Sometimes you've got your arm twisted up your back. It's
very
difficult.
Yeah, you look at I'm trying to think of an example. I mean, Declan Rice, I suppose, where he got his chance at a reasonably young age, grabbed it with both hands. I think he had an agent to begin with, but now I think his father and his brother handle.
Yeah, I think so.
him.
I think it's within the family,
Yeah.
which I think is a good thing, because I think then the agent or the representative or the advisors, whatever you want to call them, they're doing it for Declan. They're not doing it for what they're getting out of it. I mean, they'll get a fee. Obviously, all agents get a fee, but some agents will try and tout their player to the club that he gets the biggest fee.
And would you come under a lot of pressure from agents saying, "Well, why isn't he in the first team?" So he's not going to stay with you unless you make sure he gets in the first team.
Some, but I would negate that by saying, "Well, look, I don't make that decision." But if you want a decision on that, you've got to go and speak to the manager, because I don't make that decision. I can only put the player in front of the manager. He's in the squad.
And one of the
he picks.
One of the other really interesting things in the book is the relationship that the youth team coach has with the manager. Where, I mean, you relate one episode where I think it was Alan Pardew sold Chris Cohen, and the first thing you knew about it when you read it on the website.
That's right. Yeah.
And this was a player who was seen as probably better than Mark Noble at the time.
Well, they came to the club together, same age. And Chris made his debut before Mark.
Yeah.
And
I can remember thinking he looks as if he could be a really good player.
I think he could have and should have stayed with us. It wasn't my decision, and I wasn't even aware of it. But the managers work in different ways, and he didn't feel the need to perhaps tell me.
But you say it was on the basis of one dodgy performance when he was playing at left back, when he's actually a central midfielder.
Exactly,
and on that basis he was sold to, was it Nottingham Forest?
I think originally Yeovil Town
for £25,000 £35,000, and he's actually had a good career with Nottingham Forest.
I think then they sold him for nigh on, £900,000 to Notts Forest. Now had a great career at Notts Forest. He's now at Luton as a coach. I went up to his testimonial dinner. He had a testimonial dinner at Nottingham when he was retiring, and his agent, who I knew very, very well, a nice guy, Dave Geiss, he invited me up and said, "Would you like to come up?" I said, "I'd love to." I hadn't seen Chris for many a year, but that's one that maybe could have done better if he'd have stayed at the club. But these things happen.
You don't really relate many clashes that you would have had with managers over that sort of thing. I mean, did you go and see Alan Pardew and say, "What on earth are you doing?"
No, I didn't. No, I didn't. The deed was done. The deed was done, so there was no point in creating a scene or having an argument about that. I just showed my disappointment, and I said it to Mark during the interview, and Mark was saying he felt exactly the same at the time. But no, there's no point in that respect creating a scene, because I suppose it's a bit of self-preservation as well amongst that. If I felt very, very strongly, obviously you would, about certain things, which I did on certain occasions. But in that respect, the manager, if you like, holds the upper hand. He's got the voice of the board. The board are going to back the manager before they back the youth coach, basically. So I thought, well, there's no point, no point in creating a fuss.
Which manager do you think was? I mean, let's take John Lyall out of the equation here, because I think most West Ham fans would just say, well, he was the best manager we've ever had. Let's look at all the others. Which of them do you think were the best as regards giving youth players a chance, taking an interest in them, going to the games, knowing who they were?
I think you've got to say Harry, because Harry blooded a lot of young players at that time. Harry Redknapp was interested in youth teams and youth players. Could be and was very critical at times about the way things were done, or this player, or methodology.
Yeah, you were really angry with him once, weren't you?
Yes, it was the semi-final at Goodison Park. We were played in the FA Youth Cup. We'd won the first leg 3-0 to get to the final of the FA Youth Cup. And me and Peter Braybrook, who was my assistant at that time, we felt we were vulnerable at set plays. We were lucky not to concede a couple of set plays and corners. So we spent the week between the two games basically ticking the players over, but tactically working on better organisation at set plays. Because I felt if we concede early in a game, they're going to keep peppering us with crosses and all sorts, and getting free kicks and corners and so on. So to be honest, on the night we didn't play that great. We didn't play that well, and they scored. They won 1-0, and they scored in the 89th minute. So it was a 3-1 aggregate win. So we won 1, we lost 1-0, but won the overall tie. And me and Pete shook each other's hands out to go, and I just said to Pete, "Job done, Pete. We're in the final." And he went, "Yeah, terrific, isn't it?" So the chairman come in, and he said just a few words. "Well done, lads." Terry Brown, that was. And the chief exec, Paul Aldridge, they both came in, and Harry and Frank came in. And to my surprise, Harry tore into him a little bit and said, "You didn't play well, you didn't pass the ball, poor movement, you've got to be braver on the ball." And he was quite angry about it. He was angry about the performance rather than the result. But I just felt it was it was a cup competition, job done. We were in the final, and but I think we made up for it in the final over the 2 legs against Coventry, because we gave an absolute first class performance in the second leg at Upton Park.
Yeah, I think. I remember going to, I can't remember whether it was that or whether there was one against Liverpool as well, wasn't there?
Yeah, that was a few years early with Frank and Rio in the team.
I think I went to that one.
Yeah, we lost 2-0 at Upton Park.
Yeah.
And we didn't play particularly. Liverpool were better than us on the night. Then we went to Anfield, we were 2-0 down on aggregate, and we scored in the first minute. Frank Lampard scored. Great goal, half volley from the edge of the box, really good goal, fired it in. So 2-1 game on basically, and it was 2-1 up until about 2 minutes to half time. We had 2 corners, got flicked on at the near post. It was Lee Boiling at the back post. All he had to do was put his head to it and put it in, and he put his head to it and put it wide. So that would have been 2-2 and not to be. And then they broke away and scored and restored the 2-goal advantage, and obviously they won the tie overall. But Steve Highway came onto the pitch with me and after the game to congratulate his team, and and I commiserating with my team, and he said to me, "Well done." He said, "We've done our jobs anyway before this game." He said, "You've got two or three great players." He said, "And I think I've got a couple of good players here because they had Carragher, they had Owen,
Yeah.
and I think as Gerrard was on the bench, I believe." And so he put it into perspective, really. It was nice to win, but it was all about developing players for the team.
What about Sam Allardyce? Because I mean, he famously, the crowd always wanted him to blood youth team players.
Yeah.
He seemed very reluctant to. And then there was that FA Cup game where we had a lot of injuries, and I think he put 5 or 6 in the team, and they lost 5-1. How does that affect a young player to be put in that kind of situation?
I think Sam was good for us. His brief was to get us up, and he did it in the first year, albeit by the playoffs. But that FA Cup tie at Notts Forest, I think, obviously, there was a cry to blood youngsters. I don't know his motives. Maybe he didn't have any other players to put in the team. But I think he may have put them in the team just to say, well, look, this is how good you think these are. I'll put them in the team. And you put 5 youngsters in an FA Cup tie away from home, and we got spanked, really. And
I can't remember who they were, but did any of them go on to make it?
I'm trying to remember the 4 or 5 that played. I know John Moncur Jr. played. I can't remember now, so I can't. I'll have to get the book. We'll have to internet the teams. I don't know, but I can remember. I said, privately, I was saying to myself,
I'm going to Google it now.
Yeah, privately, I was saying to myself, he slaughtered them players. In that respect, he's hung them out to dry a little bit. But certainly,
was it 5-1? I think
it 5-1 in the end. I think it was a period where it was maybe 2-1, and I think we had a chance to equalise. And I think we collapsed towards the end of the game.
Here we are. No, it was 5-0.
5-0 was it? All right,
Yeah.
okay. We must have had a chance at 1-0.
Right, let's scroll down to the lineups.
Yeah. I think there was a centre half there that played. I'm just trying to remember his name. He played.
So Matt Jarvis, Stuart Downing, and that must be Daniel Potts played.
Yeah, Danny Potts.
And then Alu Diarra. Well, he only ever played about 3 games for us, didn't
exactly,
he?
yeah.
Callum Driver,
yeah, right back.
Whitehead.
Yeah.
Dan Whitehead.
Danny Whitehead.
That American Sebastian, I never know how you pronounce
Sebastian
this.
Leggett.
Yeah. Maiga, Ravel Morrison, and George Moncur.
Yeah, George Moncur, John's son, yeah. So there was George, there was Callum Driver that played right back. He didn't go on and do much. George went on and I think he's still playing somewhere.
He's played in Scotland quite a lot.
Yeah.
Was it Hull City?
Yeah, I think he ended up playing at various clubs at Hull City. I think at Rotherham at one point. I think he's up in Scotland now.
Iain Dale's Book Club.
David Moyes seems to me to have a very different attitude, a slightly old-fashioned attitude, but he's not afraid to blood youth players, is he?
No, he doesn't.
And
Doesn't
seems
seem
to
to be,
take
yeah.
a real interest in what the youth team is doing.
I'm sure he does. I mean, I'm not there day to day, as you know, Ian, anymore, but I keep in touch with Kevin Keane, who's now with the youth team, and speak to Potsy occasionally.
He used to get absolutely hammered by the chicken run, didn't he,
Yeah.
Upton Park, when he was on the wing.
Yeah.
I always remember that season when he was down one side and Mark Robson was down the other,
Yeah.
and I thought that was, from a point of view of wing play, I've never seen anything better than that season with those two.
Yeah.
Mark Robson, is he back?
He's back. He's with the under-23s.
Yeah.
He's just come back about 3 months ago.
And there's another player I wanted to talk to you about from that time who I thought should have been a top-class player, Matthew Rush.
Yeah, Rushy, yeah.
I thought he was superb.
Yeah, it was a twin there. We had the two of them. We had Marcus and Matthew. Marcus was a complete opposite to Matthew. Matthew loved his football. Marcus was a good player, but didn't have the heart for the work that was required. And Matthew, for me, was a slight underachiever.
Yeah.
Could have done better. Should have done better. Great physique.
Scored some
with the ball,
amazing
scored
goals.
some really good goals.
One against Norwich.
Norwich, I remember.
Oh,
I think
my
in
God.
the end, Norwich bought him. I think he ended up
they
playing
did.
for Norwich.
Yeah.
And I remember Billy Bonds was the manager and blooded him and he loved him. But he kept me having to, come on, Matthew, you can do better, you can do more. You got it in your locker, come on.
Yeah.
So he always had to be motivated. And, and a manager wants a player that he knows what he's going to get from him.
Because there are some people who...
He was a good player, though.
He was a good player, but they just have a personality that cannot be changed.
No.
There are some people you can at least change around the edges, but there are some that you just can't.
No, exactly.
That must be really frustrating for a coach.
Yeah, it is. So that is frustrating. That no matter what advice you give them and how you wrap it up, because you think of ways, what's going to get him out of his shell today. There was one player, centre half, Callum Mcnaughton. I think he played about 2 games for the first team. He had the basic ingredients: tall, slim, decent pace, not great on the ball, but okay on the ball, good, quite good in the air, but just played like this. He played expressionless, and you think, well, come on, show some emotion, because the game is a game of emotion. You've got to, you've got to be aggressive. You've got to be calm. You've got to be, joyful when it goes well, and you've got to be angry when things not going. It's an emotional game, and he just played with no emotion. And I was constantly trying to think ways, what rocks his boat, this guy, and I never did win the battle on that one. And he left, and I don't know what he's doing now.
Let's talk about Joe Cole, who fascinates me. I would never have thought that he would develop into a really brilliant media pundit. I'd never have thought that he would have managerial ambitions. And he's just one of these players that has finished playing, clearly wants to have an involvement in the game still, but he's still got that sort of infectious enthusiasm that he would have had as a 19-year-old. Tell us about the Joe Cole story, about how he came to be at West Ham and sort of how he developed.
But you said it there. He's still got that youthful
Can't believe he's 40. I mean, he just
that youthful enthusiasm.
He still looks about 20, doesn't he?
Yeah, and he had that from day one. We had a scout named Dennis Coxall who used to do the sort of London region for us, and Jimmy Hampson was our head of recruitment, and he had told Jimmy about this kid he said, I've never seen a better kid for his age. So Jimmy said, well, bring him along, bring him on whatever it was, Tuesday training. And we brought him to training on Tuesday, and it was during half term, and we had a little friendly game in the afternoon, and Joe was going to play in this game. And Jimmy Hampson had said to Harry Redknapp, who was the manager, Harry, if you've got 5 minutes, come and have a look at this kid we've got out here. He said, he's got something, we think. He's only 13, 14. He's got something really different. Harry went, yeah, I'll be out, I'll be out. To be fair to Harry, he did come out. It was at Chadwell Heath, and he came out. And you watched Joe play, and not in a funny way, but he made you laugh. Because what he did was so infectious. It was so audacious, but effective. It wasn't just, a trick pony. It was infectious. He would go past people. He would drop a shoulder and put it through people's legs. He'd flick it over people's shoulders and get on the other side of people. And if he lost it, he'd go after it, get on his backside and tackle. It was like playground football, but in a professional team's environment. But it was like playground football. And you speak to Joe, that's where he learnt his game, in the playground, basically, on his estate where he lived. And Harry said, go and get me Dave the Gate. There was a big guy on the gate, Dave, who you come to see. He said, go and get me Dave the Gate. Dave come on, what do you want, Harry? He said, lock those gates. He said, don't let anybody out until I've spoken to Joe Cole's parents. And because obviously Harry was very, very impressed. And of course, eventually he did sign for us. And again, I think you speak to Joe, he just felt that he could relax at West Ham, and he enjoyed the environment, and he enjoyed the coaching, and his parents liked it. His parents liked the down-to-earthness about the club. There was no airs and graces about the club or the people. and they could come in and relax and be themselves.
And he was a player that I think we all knew about years before he made his debut.
Yeah.
And everyone was saying, there's this guy, he's going to come through. Were you always confident that he would make it?
I was confident that he would, but I was worried that the publicity surrounding him would have a negative effect. And
because Manchester United tried to poach him, didn't they?
Yeah,
in a fairly serious way.
Yeah, and Chelsea as well. I think Glenn Hodder was the manager at the time. I think Chelsea as well, but Fergie.
So I think Fergie offered him cup final tickets and he was going to take him on the coach.
Yeah.
I mean, that would turn anyone's head.
Yeah, exactly.
But his father was really important there, wasn't he?
Massive. Well, his father, George, God rest his soul, he's died. In effect, it was his stepfather, but really, really lovely guy. Ordinary guy, street trader, taxi driver, and he said to me and Jimmy Hampson, me and Joe are going to go and have a look at one or two clubs. Joe wants to have a little look round at clubs. He said, but he's going to sign for West Ham. So I said, well, I'd rather you sign that form now, George, and I'll put it in the drawer, and when you come back, I'll register you. He went, you don't need that. He said, all you need is my hand. And he shook my hand. He said, there's my contract. And obviously he was true to his word. And he shook my hand and Jimmy's hand, and he said, that's all you need, just my hand. He said, we'll be back. And he said he's just going to go and have a look at clubs just to see what they're like.
And of course, when you're like 8, 9, 10 years old, often at that time and before, you would play with West Ham on a Monday, or train with West Ham on a Monday, Tottenham on a Tuesday, Arsenal on a Thursday.
Yeah, that could.
Does that still happen now?
No, it can't happen now, because what happens now is that you have to sign an academy form, and the day you sign that academy form at 10 years of age, you are now registered with that football club. Mm-hmm. So in effect, you can leave at the end of that yearly contract, but the club that signs you have to pay you compensation for that player.
Yeah.
Now, depending on the age group, how long he's been there, and then his pedigree. So if he leaves at 16 just before he leaves school, and he's been there 8 years, for instance, from 8 to 16, there'd be quite a hefty sum. So
because you had to pay Charlton for Jermaine Defoe,
we had to pay Charlton for Jermaine, and because we couldn't agree a fee, and Charlton didn't want to take a fee, it has to go to a tribunal. And I've said it in the book. I think they tried to use West Ham as a sort of a lesson for people to take heed. Because we had to pay 400,000, which was unheard of for a schoolboy. Unheard of.
Worth it for him, though.
Worth it in the end, but it did put a lot of pressure on us, because I was certain that Jermaine had what it took, but you never know. And obviously we got our 5 or 6 million a few years later, and all the appearances and goals. So that 400,000 paled into insignificance. But no, it was like a punishment. I thought it was a punishment, and I thought, well, it's not a punishment, because the boy decided to leave. We wanted to sign him, so we went through the proper channels of compensation, and obviously Charlton were very pleased with the figure they got. But I don't think our chairman was at the time. He was a few years later, but not at the time. Yeah.
Josh Pask. That was an interesting anecdote towards the end of the book.
Yeah.
Just tell us about him.
Yeah, Josh was, again, a player that I thought had great potential. I really did. But there was I wouldn't call it a character flaw, but there was a flaw in his makeup that he didn't show enough emotion, and he didn't show enough desire at times. Although inwardly he was a very nice kid and from a very nice family. And he kept refusing to commit to the club. We'd offered him a scholarship. He just kept refusing to take it. He wanted to go to Arsenal. Arsenal, to be honest, were tapping him up. And we would have had to receive compensation for him, but I'd basically given up hope. Now we're into the end of May. The season's finished. There's no more training. and Josh had, not committed. And I'd gone off on holiday for a week to my son. My son lives in France, and I was about to sit down for lunch, and Dave Hunt rang me. He was outside in a little cafe, and he said, Karen's been on, Karen Brady, and she wanted an update on what's happening with Josh Pask. So he said, well, he won't commit, he won't sign. We've tried everything. We've offered him a contract, we've offered him a pro contract. He won't commit. And it's not to do with the money. He just feels Arsenal play better football than West Ham, and that was...
Which at that point was probably maybe a fair judgment.
Anyway, so...
Less so nowadays.
He said, Karen just said, well, Dave said, Tony's on holiday for a week, and she said, well, tell Tony to come back and have one more go at him. You and Tony go round his house, have one more go. And to be fair, I did do that. I said, book me a flight, Nice to London, I'll come back. I didn't have enough, so we went round his house. The kit man picked me up in a van, took me round his house at Manor Park, and me and Dave sat in the house for 3 or 4 hours trying to talk to the parents. And the boy stayed upstairs in his bedroom, didn't come down once, which I thought was a bad sign. I thought, well, I've got no chance here. But I persevered, and I just said to him, this is how much we think of you, of your young Josh. I've broken a holiday, to come back to have one more go, at convincing you to sign for West Ham. And he didn't commit on that night. I stayed overnight in the airport hotel, flew back to Nice the next day, and when I got back a week or so later, Dave Hunt said, Josh Pash is going to sign. I said, oh, is he? He said, yeah. He said he was so impressed that you had broke your holiday that, that's how much you felt you wanted him to sign, that he signed for West Ham. Sadly, it didn't quite work out, but he's now playing for Coventry.
What was the clinching argument when you said, look, mate, I'm going to face the wrath of Karen Brady if he doesn't sign?
Yeah, no, I didn't. No, to be fair, Karen was right. Have one more go, never to lose, and give her credit for that. Although it broke, a day of my holiday, but in the end, if it had been a player that, and I think he'd got a squad number, I think he played one game or came on a sub in one game. So he was almost the finished article, almost. Didn't quite work out. It would have been, it was worth it anyway because he's a good lad and a decent player. And it didn't quite work out for him, but that's the way it goes.
There have been various different owners of West Ham over the years. I mean, in your job, how much contact would you have with the owners or maybe none at all?
Not really. In the earlier days, it was the Kearns family. And I had quite a good relationship with Martin Kearns. Len Kearns was chairman's son, who Martin eventually became chairman, because he used to come and watch a lot of the youth matches. So we'd always used to bump in, and he came on a couple of youth tours when we had youth tours at the end of the season or pre-season. And so he was always very interested in the youth and took a lot of interest in that. So I was quite close to him there. When Terry Brown took over, got on quite well with Terry Brown and Paul Aldridge, who was the chief exec. They were very interested. Terry, especially the chairman, was very youth orientated. If I went to him within reason and wanted something, invariably he'd find a way of finding whatever it was I needed or wanted. If it's an extra staff or new equipment or something, he'd find ways of finding the money or finding a way to do it. Because money was always the issue at West Ham, always has been. Yeah. Money has always been the issue. We're at the maximum of our budget, we can't spend any more, etc. And Terry Brown, the Icelandics, took over, didn't they? They were quite...
They didn't have a problem splashing around the money.
No, I went to them one day and I asked them, to upgrade our facilities at Chadwell Heath, could we build like a viewing gallery for the sports hall? So the parents make a state-of-the-art viewing gallery and little tea bar, so they could knock an hole in the wall, put a little structure up, and his chairman said, "Go and do it." Or Egerton said, "Go and do it." And we got knocked back because they said that Dagenham and Redbridge Council or Barking Council wouldn't give planning permission. I think that was a bit of a ruse, really, but I'm not sure. But we didn't get it done. But they were free, and go and do it. They never turned away anything. Even Scott Duxbury, who was the chief exec, who's now chairman of Watford Football Club. No, he was very, very good. But the good thing about the Icelandics and Scott was that it was them that gave me my testimonial.
I want to come on to that in a moment. My memory of Scott Duxbury, I had lunch with him and Greg Demetriou, who's the press officer.
Yeah,
at the
he's
time.
now working for the FA, Greg, yeah.
And the thing I remember about Scott Duxbury, I was fascinated. I've never met a man with manicured eyebrows before. Yeah. I thought, what do I make of that?
Yeah.
But nice guy.
Yeah, it was good. He was good to me. He was good to me, Scott. And again, always tried to help where he could. If there was a request for something, like for instance, once I wanted all the coaches that were at the academy as a sort of end of season treat and educational trip. We went for 3 days to visit Juventus in Turin to watch training for their youth players, and they said, yeah. I said it was going to cost about 15,000. 2 nights in a hotel, flights to Turin, etc. So we go EasyJet. We ain't going, And do it. I think it's a good idea, really good idea. And we did it. So things like that, they were very, very good. And Scott was very good in the Icelandics. And then obviously after the Icelandics, Gold Sullivan Brady came in, or Gold and Sullivan bought it, and Karen came in as their chief exec.
And she was more hands-on?
Very much so. Yeah.
In a good way or bad way? I
think she has her finger. I think all that she's got a finger on the pulse of what's going on within the football club.
Because that's interesting.
She rules with a fist of iron.
Because a lot of fans think that because she does The Apprentice and she's in the House of Lords that she's a bit part-time at West Ham, but that's not your experience.
No, it's not. I don't think she comes in every single day, or she didn't in my time. And then when she was doing The Apprentice, she may have been off for a couple of weeks, but most certainly she'd have been on the end of the telephone. She would know what's going on a daily basis. And there was a problem, they'd ring her and she'd sort it. But she's a tough cookie. She's got to be to survive in basically a man's world in that respect. Although a lot more women are in the game now than they were when she first started.
Back in 1989, when John Lyle resigned, you put your name forward.
Yeah.
Or was it Lou Macari resigned?
No, John was, his contract wasn't renewed, was the official thing, but it's basically been said.
Yeah.
But,
I don't know why I said resign, because he didn't resign. You put your name forward to be the manager. Was that something that you'd always wanted to do, or the opportunity came up and you thought, okay, well, I'll put that.
Yeah, I think
I'm not going to lose anything by doing
exactly. I think that's what it was, Ian. The opportunity was there. If John had stayed, I'd been happy just doing what I was doing. So the opportunity, and what I said earlier, I thought, well, whoever comes in, may make a clean sweep anyway and get rid of us. So I might as well try and look after my own business and try and get the job. Whether I was prepared, good enough or not, I don't know, but I'll apply and see what happens. But I got an interview. I went and spoke to the board. I sat in front of the board and they asked me various questions and how I would deal with this player, how I would deal with that player, and who would be your staff, how would you restructure it, etc., etc. So I got that far, but obviously they chose Lou Macari because of Lou's experience.
Let's talk about your testimonial, because I was actually got quite emotional reading about it. It must have been a very emotional time for you.
Yeah, it was very much so. I think initially, when Scott rang me...
I was there, by the way.
Oh, thank you. When Scott rang me, he said, we decided we want to give you a testimonial. So I said, oh, fantastic. Oh, dear, it was completely out of the blue. I was sitting in the car park at Barnet Football Club waiting for the team to arrive because West Ham reserves were playing Arsenal reserves.
It doesn't get much more glamorous than that, does it?
So I was sitting in the car park, at Barnet Football Club, and obviously taking that call. And I was quite... And Scott said, you don't have to do anything. He said, we'll organise it or we'll do it all. Don't worry about it. So I said, oh, lovely. He said, we'll sort out the opposition. He said, well, you won't have to do a lot. Oh, terrific. So that's how it started, and obviously Scott was dismissed. Karen came in with Golden Sullivan, and one of my first conversations with Karen, I've been granted a testimonial, Karen. Will the club still honour it? And she said, "Oh yes." She said, "As long as it doesn't cost us anything," which is fair enough, you know. She said, "As long as it doesn't." But I had to hire the ground for the night for £1, so it's like a token gesture, because it has to be seen that you've hired the ground for the evening.
So how does it work do you have to pay for the people manning the turnstiles, or does the club pay for that?
No, the club don't pay anything. What happens is we set up a committee, because technically speaking, you don't. I'm not allowed to organise it.
Right.
I don't know the reason why, but I'm not. But obviously you're in the background, you do.
Yeah.
So I had a committee. So I had a business guy of mine of Essex, named Keith Cosby. I had Dave Geiss, who was an accountant and football agent. And I had Tony Cotty and Alvin Martin on my committee. And it was their job to, organise what we could organise in terms of talking to the club. And the stewards for the night, to a man, said, "We'll do it and we won't take any fee." One or two that did want to take a fee or a reduced fee, some took a reduced fee just to cover their expenses. I have to pay through the receipts of the football from the match. So I have to print the programmes, I have to pay for the programmes. Policing, I think there was minimal policing, which the police paid for themselves, because it was quite minimal. And the hardest part was, who are we going to play? Gianfranco Zola was the manager, and he said, no, we put out the first team, not a problem, we'll sort it. So I had to organise the date with Gianfranco, and it was the Wednesday night, before the very last game of the Premier League season, which was the following Sunday. And so it was always difficult to get teams to commit players, because if they've got one more game left.
Yeah.
So I asked the FA if I could put together an England 11, and I thought to myself, well, a lot of the England 11 were players that I'd worked with and coached anyway, and use a little bit of artistic licence, get some under 23 England internationals and etc. But Adrian Bevington, who was at the FA at the time, and I think he's still there, I'm not sure, there was too many barriers to overcome. And I was at Chelsea one day at Cobham, the training ground, with the academy one Sunday morning, because I used to go home and away sometimes. Sometimes I'd go to Little Heath, watch the home games. The away game, this time I go to Cobham today. It's always a big test playing Chelsea, because they're one of the best academies. And I was on the sideline watching a game. I didn't realise it, but the Chelsea first team were running around the perimeter of the pitch, having a warm down from the Saturday, and they had a European tie in the midweek. And as I was standing on the touchline, I saw two players running towards me in Chelsea kit, the training kit, and it was Frank and John Terry. They come running over to me. "Oh, hello, guys," and they come and give me a little hug and a little shake in the hands. "How you doing? What are you doing?" "Oh, yeah, good. I'll come back and watch the game in a minute." So he said, when I'm changed, I'll come back and have a chat, which Frank did. And he said to me, "I've heard you've got a testimonial." I said, "Yeah, I have." He said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I don't know. I'm trying to think." He said, "Why don't you get an Academy 11?" He said, "I spoke to a few players already." He said, they're all desperate to come and play." I said, "That's a good idea." He said, "Will you play?" He went, "Of course I will. Not a problem." And I said to John Terry, "Will you play?" He went, yeah, I'll play." I said, no, you wasn't the academy, as long as the other lads. He said, "Well, yeah, I was still there, wasn't I?" I said, "Oh, yeah, I'll play."
But that was quite something.
And that's how it was born.
That was quite something for Frank to do, because at that time, 2010, he was still very unpopular with the West Ham crowd, wasn't he? And he'd said a few things in the press that maybe I suspect now he might have regretted.
Yeah.
So that was quite something for him to do.
Yeah, I think that showed great respect to me, I think. I really do.
I'll tell you an anecdote about him. About 2016, 2017, I was at a party conference in Manchester, and he was playing for Manchester City at the time.
Yeah.
And we walked into this restaurant, and he was there with Christine Blakely. And we had a table around the corner, And my boss said to me, well, you go and talk to him. I said, I can't talk to him. It's in a restaurant. It'd be really rude. So what I did, I sent him a bottle of champagne. And I wrote something on the sort of a note just saying, see, West Ham fans aren't all bad. So some of us appreciate what you did for us.
All right.
And he sort of getting quite emotional. And he came around the corner and talked to us about half an hour.
Yeah. No, that's Frank all over. Very grounded. His feet's always on the ground. When I was asked for the interviews, not a problem. Whenever.
And his
when
is
can
one
you
of
get
the
him?
most thoughtful.
Yeah. And we spent the whole afternoon talking,
Yeah.
and I was recording it on my phone. And when I asked later on, the publisher said to me, could you get some quotes for these from these? I said, what players do you want? He went, we want Frank Lampard, Rio Ferdinand, Mark Noble. So I WhatsApped him. Within 30 minutes, Frank's replied. Within 30 minutes, bang, done. Mark Noble, the next day, to be fair to him. And Rio, 2 weeks later, I still ain't heard. So I sent him another WhatsApp, sorry to keep bothering you, Rio, a little reminder. And then within 20 minutes, boom, his little quote. But Frank, straight away, genuine guy, ordinary guy, grounded. And I watched the game last night, Everton, Aston Villa, and
Burnley.
Claret and Blue.
Yeah, I know.
The Burnley-Everton game.
Yeah.
And at 2-1, I thought we were going to win this. And then the defending was awful. And I felt really sorry for him after the game. Really sorry for him. I could see the emotion in him, pent up anger in him. So, yeah, he's having a tough time.
Certainly
But, his character, he'll shine through, he'll come through. I don't know what will happen with Everton, but he'll come through it.
So going back to the testimonial itself on the day, it was quite a dramatic. I very rarely ever go to friendlies or testimonials because they're not. It's not the same, is it? There's not that competitive
it's fun
spirit
and fair,
there.
really, isn't it? Yeah.
But I did come to that because first of all, I thought it was important because. Okay, we've never met before, but I just knew of your contribution to West Ham, and frankly, I wanted to see Paolo Di Canio again, who's my all-time favourite player. And it was quite his performance in that match was quite something, wasn't it?
Oh, he's ever the showman. I think I told the story in the book. He said, "I play half a game." Again, I can't do the acting. I play half a game. I said, "Paolo, just go out there for 10 minutes. As long as you get out there, fans come to see you." Okay. So we comes off at half time, and so then Paolo, off you come then, Paolo, and Gary Alexander, you can come on now. The Millwall player.
Yeah.
He had a terrific career, Gary Alexander, by the way. And he went, no, I want 10 more minutes. I said, I thought you were saying you'd come off. No. He said, I want 10 more minutes. He said, I want the adulation of the crowd when I come off. So 10 minutes goes by, come on Paolo, and then the crowd obviously, Paolo Di Canio, he's the forever and he come off the pitch. I've got a nice picture at home. He's giving me a hug on the touchline and he's whispering me, thank you for this wonderful experience. And I thought, well, very emotional. He played the game emotionally, didn't he?
Paid all his own costs as well.
Paid all his own expenses, living in Rome at the time.
Yeah.
His own flight and his own hotel, paid it all. Didn't want to take a bean. Yeah.
And then he came on again.
And then I didn't even know that was happening. Him and Franco came on. They must have been in the tunnel. And he said, "Come on, we'll go on." And they come up with the West Ham 11.
Because it was a shame in a way that it wasn't the week after the season finished, wasn't it? Because some of the players, the clubs wouldn't let them play.
No. Well, it was the three Chelsea players because they had one more game, but to win the title, they had to beat Wigan at home, which and they won 9-0. But Ancelotti at the time wouldn't let them play. So you can go, but he wouldn't let them play. Glenn Johnson, they wouldn't let Glenn Johnson play because Benitez had a club do that evening and he wouldn't excuse him from it. And obviously Michael Carrick's wife Lisa was just about to have a child and he didn't want to leave Manchester for the evening, which was fair enough. And Jermaine Defoe couldn't play because Tottenham were playing Man City on that same night to sort of get a game in to finish the season off. So, there was 2 or 3 that couldn't play. But in the end, I had so many players, I was trying to fit them all on. And there was a group of players that, that obviously didn't get changed, like Alvin Martins, Paul Allens, Bobby Barnes.
It was a great day.
People like that.
Iain Dale's Book Club.
Let's talk about your departure, because clearly it caused you a lot of pain at the time, the way it was handled.
Yes, I was quite hurt initially with the way it was handled. I was hurt initially that they wanted to replace me anyway, but Karen sold me the fact that they wanted to keep me on as like an ambassador. And I thought, well, okay. And to be fair, I did have 15 odd months left on my contract, so it was either take your money and go, or stay on in another capacity and work your contract. And she said, at the end of that, we'll give you another contract, which will stay ambassador. So I said, okay, they're thinking long term. Nothing lasts forever, so I'll go then, and I'll support the new guy. I'll try and help him. I'll try and support him. And genuinely felt that. So, but then when HR called me in and said, well, we don't think the ambassadorial role is working, and there's one or two people who don't think it's working, and they offered me, I think it was token, basically, they offered me so many hours per year or something, and it equated to about 1 day a week. And I thought, you don't really want me to stay here, or a redundancy package. I said, well, tell me what a redundancy package is and I'll take that, basically. So they made me redundant, and I left. But because the Daily Mail rang me and said to me, we've heard you've been sacked, and I said, well, no, technically I haven't been sacked. But I think I've been manoeuvred into a corner where I had very little wriggle room, and took the redundancy package. And I said I was just disappointed with the way they handled it. That was what I was more disappointed with than anything else. It wasn't about how much money I got from a redundancy package. It wasn't nothing to do with that at all. It was just to do with, I just thought it could have done, after 43 years service. Yeah. And I think reasonably successful service, it could have been handled a different way.
And what's your relationship like with the club now?
Well, I bumped into Karen once when they unveiled the Bobby Moore plaque on his house in Barking. I went to that, and she said hello and was quite polite. And they invited me to Chadwell Heath when they refurbed all the facilities at Chadwell Heath for the academy, and they invited me to the opening of that. And I spoke to David Sullivan very briefly when he said to me, I bet you wish you had these facilities when you were here. And I said, yeah, it would have been nice. I said, but it's still about what goes out on, what happens out on the grass. That's the real thing that matters. And he didn't reply. But that's about it, really. So I don't speak to them. I have no need to. But no, I mean, I've got no axe to grind. I've got no.
But didn't they take away your season tickets as well?
Yes, they did. When I say they took them away, I had them for that season because I was dismissed in this September. So I had season tickets for that season. At the end of that season, they didn't offer them to me. They didn't offer them to me as complimentary, or they didn't offer them to me as you can buy them. And I was still a little bit angry, and I just let it slide and didn't make a fuss about it and let it slide.
Do you still go?
I still go. My brother-in-law is as seasons to get older, and I sit behind the goal with him because he has 4 tickets, him and his 2 children, and his wife rarely goes. So he's always got a spare ticket. So he says to me, do you fancy it this week? I was at the Everton game on Sunday. I'm not going tonight, though, the Lyon game, but I'll be watching it on the TV and wishing them, hope they get through.
Yeah, of course, I'm on the radio, which is... I shouldn't really multitask, but...
you'll have one eye on that, I'm sure.
Well, possibly.
Yeah.
It's an amazing achievement, actually.
Yes, and they've done fantastic. Well, I think all credit to David Moyes. And I've said it before, all credit to David Sullivan, in effect, for being brave enough to bring him back. He'd sacked him, brought in Pellegrini, which didn't work. And I have to say with Pellegrini, I don't doubt his credentials and what he's achieved and what he's done, but I just didn't think he was the right fit for us at that time. And I think that's so it proved. And David Sullivan was brave enough to give David Moyes a call and say, come back, have another go. Which
I think most of us thought was not a good idea, but we've all had to eat humble pie because he's done an absolutely fantastic job. Because
obviously his time there initially was, he knew what was what the club was.
Yeah.
He knew the hierarchy, knew how the club worked, knew most of the players. And his biggest problem was trying to filter the players that didn't work, that Pellegrini had brought in, and for big money, and they didn't work. So he's turning it around, and I hope we can continue this success for another couple of months.
Well, that would be nice, wouldn't it? One can but
Yes.
hope. Well, Tony, it's been absolutely brilliant talking to you. I know I said we were only going to do half an hour. We've now done, I think, an hour and 20 minutes. So.
Oh, right, okay. I'm sure you'll edit it down.
No, we won't. No, absolutely not. Well, I've enjoyed it. I hope you have too.
Yes, I have. Still a hammer through and through. No regrets.
Thank goodness for that. Well, listen, Tony's book is called A Lifetime in Football at West Ham United by Tony Carr, published by Icon Books in hardback at £20. Every West Ham fan should buy it. It goes without saying. But I think it's the sort of book where even if you're not a West Ham fan, you get a lot out of it because you learn a lot about coaching methods, about what it's like to deal with younger footballers. And there aren't many books out on the market that tell you all about that. So do go out and buy it.
There you go. An hour and a half for Tony Carr. We will be back on Monday, hopefully, after the Chelsea game. Hopefully we'll all be back. Until then, goodbye.
Bobby Moore. More than just a podcast. Bobby Moore. More than just a podcast.